Let me switch to China. Do you think that the next age of U.S. national security challenges is really one centered around the relationship and tensions with China?
Well, certainly the great rival now is China, but it's different than the Cold War because during the Cold War, our great rival, the Soviet Union, was a military giant, but it was frankly a technological midget and economically completely isolated from the international economy. China is very different. It is a technological giant. It is increasingly seeking military capabilities that look as if they are trying to change the balance in the Asia-Pacific. So it's a different kind of challenge, but it's one that I think can be met.
President Biden is looking into how the pandemic started, and he is looking into the idea it may have started at the Wuhan lab. What advice would you give him about trying to get actual answers about what happened?
Well, the first thing is to recognize that there was too much of a tendency early on to dismiss this possibility of a laboratory leak. And I think there was a lot, and I think the press bears some responsibility for this. Well, it had to be animal to human transmission. These were conspiracy theories about a laboratory leak. And in fact, some of the evidence was right in front of our faces. We know that there were State Department diplomats who inspected, so to speak, that laboratory and came back and said that the safety practices were substandard. When we knew that there were patients back in November that had suspicious symptoms, maybe that was a time to start asking tough questions. And I think we perhaps didn't say enough about the problems of the WHO going in and allowing the Chinese to control the territory while they were trying to investigate. So now, better late than never. I'm glad we are fully looking at this. I'm not sure we'll ever know fully the story, but putting pressure on the Chinese, taking this to the United Nations, raising the profile of what China needs to do to help us get this right. I was actually National Security Advisor when SARS hit, and it was the same problem. We knew something was happening. We couldn't get answers from the Chinese. And so if we're not going to keep repeating this problem, and this one had much more devastating consequences, then we're going to have to be a little bit more aggressive with the Chinese about the need to cooperate. But I think we made a mistake earlier on in many people, many officials dismissed this possibility.
Were the officials in the response, were they too accommodating of China in the sense that early on we were told the Chinese are on top of it? I can't imagine during the Cold War U.S. government ever saying, well, the Russians have told us they're on the case, right, everything's fine. Were we too trusting of the Chinese?
No, it's a really good point, John. In fact, I think there were even those who said that President Trump's early decisions about border closures and travel restrictions were xenophobic or not appropriate. Turns out they were incredibly appropriate. Yes, maybe there was a little bit too much of trusting of the Chinese. I'm going to give people a break, too, during this time. When you're in the middle of one of these unfolding crises, you don't really know what's going on. But I would, given what we experienced with SARS, and oh, by the way, with avian flu as well in the early 2000s, I don't think it was worth trusting that the Chinese were being transparent about what was going on there.